Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is Dr. Nancy Flournoy, and I'm going to be talking about the IceWave patch today. And you might see I wonder why all the horses are in the picture. And so I just like to get it out of the way to start that the AccuLife patch for horses is IceWave. It's just that the company had to go through a different approval process to get the approval to market IceWave for horses. So it has a different name. It also comes with a few little balls to try and help it stick on the horse a little better. But if you look, you can see well, I'm not showing, yeah, I can see little patches on the back ends of these horses. And there's a number of good videos online about patching the horses and how it helps them with in their rodeos and with the injuries that they get for people riding them aggressively. So I'm not going to say anything more about horses at the moment, although we may talk about animals a little bit more generally. So I am going to share my screen. And then start the show. So, as I said, I'm Dr. Nancy Flournoy. I'm a PhD in biomathematics, so I'm a doctor, but not a medical doctor. So I am not giving medical advice. I've been working in clinical research all my life, all my career life, and I know a lot about medicine, biology, and chemistry, etc. But when it came to the Lifewave patches, I really had to go back to school. And that's part of what these talks are all about, is educating myself as to what the science is behind the patches. And as I educate myself, I'm happy to share what I learned with you. So the IceWave patch comes in what they call a sleeve. You get 30 of them in a sleeve. The patches look like little Band-Aids. IceWave and Energy are the only two patches where you put on two at a time. So there's a tan one and a white one. And we'll talk more about patching at the end of the talk, I think it is. But what's on this slide then here is what the FDA has approved and all the lawyers have approved IceWave to actually put on their package. So this is, and what's on the next slide. What's on the next slide is true of all the patches. But for IceWave, what is established is that it can be used for whole body or local pain. And we'll talk about both of those a bit. That it's fast acting. You'll see some figures on that. And that it's non-addictive. So all the Lifewave patches, we have this rainbow of different tools, different cures, different assists to put in your medicine kit. All of these patches are patented. They're a proprietary form of phototherapy. They're targeted, passive, wireless nanotechnology with little nano antenna that are going to vibrate. So they're going to communicate to your body with no drugs, no chemicals, and no stimulus. Now, how do they do that? Well, my overview talk goes into it in a fair amount of detail, but just to give a brief comment, which I do at each of the talks, the Lifewave products are made of crystals. They absorb your body heat, and that makes them then emit light frequencies back into your body. And these frequencies are going to signal the body to increase the production of specific metabolites. And the two references I have down here are some of the early work on how the patches, establishing how the patches actually function. That is that they do what I just said they do, and other basic properties. So what we have here then is a picture just to remind you that light can come into a crystal, and the crystal can spread it into each of the little wavelengths, and then we have all the colors on what the crystal So the analogy in your body is the light's coming off your body and then it's getting reflected back, but not all the light waves are getting reflected back, just the ones that are going to do what is desired for the particular patch. So in the top right here, we have the founder and excuse me, CEO of Lifewave, David Schmidt. And I have said all of this, it's on this slide, so I will not dwell on it. Now, what David Schmidt has told us is that the aim of the Lifewave patch, the IceWave patch, is to flood the area of pain with electrons. And so the first thing I ask is, how in the world would flooding an area of the body with electrons affect whether you had any pain or not? And this has been sort of a quest of mine to figure this out, particularly because I never really liked electricity. So I had to get over that hump of, what do electrons do flooding around in your body and how do they work? Electricity was always something I thought of as, you grab the cord and you get shocked, and it itself is associated with pain. And well, now I think electricity and other forms of electromagnetic flux are becoming kind of my best friend because they're really way cool. So I'll share some with you. So first, let's get a definition of pain. And this is from the International Association for the Study of Pain. There's a lot about pain out there in the world. Everybody wants to help you with your pain. But how they define it is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. So its purpose, why the body has this thing called pain, is to prevent you from actually further damaging your tissue if it's in being threatened, and to protect your body while it's healing. And when that works, it's great. And when it turns into chronic pain, then it really does not serve a good function at all. So it can become pathological and dysfunctional. And that's really the pain that we care to address, because otherwise it's doing what it should do in the body. And we'll talk more about that. But we have several different types of pain, and we're going to focus on what's in the purple box here. So nociceptive, it's initiated because you got some noxious chemical, you had mechanical, something crashed down on your arm, or you had some obstruction that got into your is affecting your blood supply, and your tissue can't get enough oxygen or nutrients. And what we're going to see as we're talking about why a bunch of electrons in your tissue might help relieve pain, we're going to find that it's really related to the Chinese medicine notion. Although we can measure it, that if you have stagnated or stuck energy and the energy flow is diminished, then you're going to, in Chinese medicine, you're going to get sick. But it's also been known, described as a way to cause you pain. Now, the two other ways here of pain that we won't discuss further are peripheral neuropathic. So that is when the pain, it's actually the nerve that has a lesion in it itself. And I just know one case experience, which was a cousin of mine who had a nerve actually damaged as part of a surgery. And he tried the IceWave patch and found it irritating to that nerve directly. But when he used the carnosine patch, which there's a whole nother talk on, he found it soothing. So I don't know how many case studies there are out there. They say that's just one, but we'll leave discussion of this type of pain to some other talk at another time. And then really associated with it is this central pain where the lesion is actually in the central nervous system. And that, well, I do know that the IceWave can be positively affect things like stroke and other things that are related to the nervous system. So I'm not sure how far its influence goes in beyond what we're going to talk about today. But for today we'll stick to what's in the purple box here. So there are these things called nociceptors, and here's a Wikipedia definition that you have. Well, and you can look at the picture. Here's a little hand, and at the end of the hand, you've got nerve endings. And this is then blowing up that little picture of the nerve ending. This is the nociceptor. And it's got these little, what they call receptors on the end. So those are like little locking docks for molecules to come in and hook up. And when they do, they'll send a signal up to the brain. So this is the means by which the information about what's going on in the body and how it's damaged or not gets transported to the brain. So the response to the pain response starts with immune cell activation, and I'm going to give some names now, but in the next slide I'll show you some pictures so you can see a little bit more what they actually are. So just kind of let this roll over you if these aren't names you're familiar with. So macrophages are a cell, and they release something called cytokines. And you might have heard of that in the case of COVID-19, that one of the things that was bad about COVID-19 is it released all these cytokines and many more than could be useful, and the body was overloaded by them, and also growth factors. So that is part of your natural response to having your tissue damaged. And then there are some types of lymphocytes that get released, such as some cells that are called killer cells or killer T cells. Well, they don't get released, they start multiplying. So you get more and more and more of them. And I'll show you a picture, as I say, of those. But what all these cells do that come in to sort of help heal you is create an inflammatory soup, and that's what then causes the pain sensations. And they then spread to surrounding tissue, and the area of pain gets bigger. So here's the picture. In this case, the wound that's being depicted is on the outside of, I don't know, this could be an arm or a leg or who knows what, but it doesn't have to be on the outside of the body. It could be on any of the organs or just, tissue anywhere in the body. And the first thing that happens is the platelets here get released to help with blood clotting if you are bleeding and it's needed. And then there's this cell called the mast cell, which is the green one, and it starts secreting molecules that go back over here. On the left, we have the blood vessel. So it's sending these little molecules to the blood vessel that's going to cause the blood vessel to get bigger or smaller. And in particular, you see these blue molecules coming down. These are neutrophils. So they're coming down in the bloodstream. And the mast cells here told this blood vessel to open up the gates on the cell wall and let the neutrophil through. So it gave it the signal that we need those neutrophils here, get out of the blood vessel and come to work. and the blood vessel opens up and lets the neutrophils out. And then the neutrophils send out, you see this, these are two different colors, they're kind of alike, but the black were to indicate, bacteria or bad things that need to be taken care of. And the brown things are molecules that the neutrophil secretes that are going to go after the black ones, the bad guys. The other thing the neutrophils do, you see it's here kind of like Pac-Man, it just swallowed one of the pathogens. So they can gobble up the bad guys, and then they need to join the garbage system and be disposed of themselves. This other molecule, which I mentioned on the other slide, is called a macrophage, and it's this big, kind of thing with all these little arms going off of it. And it's really, the little purple dots here are the cytokines. And you see they're going back over here in the direction of the blood vessel. So they are telling the blood vessel where the pain site is. They're laying, it's the breadcrumbs, they're laying out the path. And the cytokines then actually start tissue repair. And when then everything heals and your body's nice and healthy and your garbage system goes up and cleans up all the debris that's left and everything's left whole, that's wonderful, but it doesn't always end that way. This is just another shot of the same thing, only here I'm showing up in the right-hand corner that you have your receptors in in a joint. Looks like an arm joint, not a knee joint, but same difference, and that the pain could be initiated from arthritis in that way. And whatever, here, look on the left, you have your infection energy. It doesn't matter what the injury was, you're going to have these same four molecules and everything associated with them get into the act. So you get the neutrophils, the macrophages, the lymphocytes, and the mast cells. And then they start either releasing chemicals or signaling for the production of chemicals. And so we have the cytokines and the pain mediators, and then we have all these abbreviations. You might recognize histamine, but the list is actually much longer than's on this slide. It depends on what slide you find, what different long lists of things get depicted as to what results from this action. Now, one thing I noted, and I didn't see anybody talk about it, but one thing I noted is that of all the little things that get produced here in this process, every one that I saw labeled with a charge was a positive charge. So we're going to have that in the back of our minds, because David Schmidt said he's going to flood your pain area with electrons. Electrons have negative charges. So perhaps this is part of the cleanup system where you're getting the negative charges to combine with the positive charges and help the garbage disposal system. So then this is just the end of the nerve cell again. That's going to take all this information back to the brain. So when you have chronic pain, it's because the injury wasn't resolved. It's unresolved for really two basic reasons. Either the injury itself didn't get resolved, or it got messed up trying to fix itself. So the ways it can get mixed up trying to fix itself is it causes fibrosis. That's where you get you get some hard tissue that's trying to block, just fill in for the good tissue. You can have prolonged toxic exposure. It can turn into an autoimmune disease. And so chronic pain is what typically IceWave is great for acute pain too, but chronic pain is what usually brings people to the table. Now, this is just a picture, same thing, but thinking now a little bit more towards the electrical point of view. We have down, look at the picture. We have on the bottom left, you have, this is the nociceptor where the signal came into the nerve. And it gets transmitted here into the spinal cord. Just follow the green line, and it gets sent up the spinal column into the brain. And that's where the messages tell the brain that the pain response is desired in order to help you heal and keep yourself from hurting yourself more. So we're going to move to sort of an electrical point of view. And just as an introduction, I got a couple of slides here to sort of, again, we're thinking of how can a bunch of electrons do anything that's useful for us. So what this picture is two hydrogen atoms, just to show you how two molecules can affect each other. Hydrogen's as simple as we can get. You have one positive, your nucleus is positive, and you have one electron. So if you have two hydrogen atoms, so the electron's pulled into it's held to the nucleus, the photon, like the moon is to the sun. It's just going to go around and around and around, or the earth is to the sun. I guess the moon is to the earth. So anyway, there's this force with the negative charge pulling into the positive charge. But when these get into and that's a strong charge, when they get close enough together, the negative charge from one gets pulled to the positive charge to the other. And so this is the way nothing's ever sort of absolute. You have a little bit of a positive charge, a little bit of a negative charge, and what's going on with one molecule affects what's going on with all of its neighbors. And so in the bottom picture now, again, remember I said that electrons like to be paired. So if we just look at this one on the left, we have a nucleus. In the first set of orbits, we have two electrons, they're paired. In the second set, we have 6 electrons, they're paired. And then there's one spare electron, and it's kind of loose there. It's not hanging on very tightly. So it can get picked up by the molecule that it's the atom that's next to it. And when it gets rotated around, it can get thrown to the next one and the next one, etc. So one electron can move from atom to atom. Now, this next slide, I still can't believe it really works. So this is cool. You're thinking that was all just kind of linear thinking. What we're looking at here is, look up here at the title, a negative charge. One electron is doing what's in this picture. So I'll wait till it starts again over here. Yeah, we start with one electron moving at a constant rate. And then all of a sudden it stops. And then you get this blast. Now, what this is showing is the electromagnetic field that one electron is generating. And so again, we're thinking of this pool of electrons that is going to come into our body by using the IceWave patch. And this is what an electron would do. And you can imagine maybe, okay, so let's go back and think. We have the tan patch and we have the white patch. And you put the white patch on the right, you put the tan patch on the left, in general, and you create a electrical, they're charged. So now you've set up an electrical current. So you've got these electrons running from one side to the other, and maybe they hit something and maybe they don't, which would cause that burst. charge. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. So how might that work actually in the cells? Well, we've got two pictures here. I use this particular set of pictures to talk about a number of different things and a number of different talks. But if you just look at the size of the cells in the two, the ones on the right are big and they're almost butting up against each other. And the ones on the left, there's a fair amount of room between them. And so what the red line depicts is a strong electrical field, like you might get if you were having some sort of medical radiological test done, like an EKG or something. And those fields are so strong that they just go blasting right through the cells, and there's nothing there to tell you that the one on the left is different from the one on the right, because they just barreled their way through. But with some of the equipment that's used to in the Lifewave studies, you are able to measure and detect the flow of the current around the cells and between the cells. And you're able to see that, you're able to measure that on the left, there is plenty of room for oxygens and nutrients to get to the cells, and for the garbage system to collect the waste from the cells and take it away. And on the right, you see that there's not so much room. And if you're looking at the green one, the electrical field is having a really hard time getting through there. And so what it would measure on the equipment is measured as electrical resistance. So it's this idea, this picture is good, so you can think of the fact that you want space between your cells, because you want Amazon to be able to get there, and you want the people that are collecting the cardboard and stuff to be able to take it away. But it's also true here that in the brain, if you have too much resistance, this between the cells, this is what your nerves are the nerve endings there are gonna pick that up. And that's the signal that tells the brain to make it feel painful. So if you want to reduce the pain, you do that by increasing the electrical conductivity between the cells. And that's what now go back and think of the picture we had before. Here, by having these charges passing through the system, they're cleaning up the mess. They're kind of like plowing the road, and the conductivity between the cells is going to improve, and the brain will get the message that everything's under control. You don't have to be in pain anymore. So it's all pretty cool. I'll just, maybe everybody knows, I don't know, but the electricity is used to treat pain. There is a review by Dr. Hushton in 2002 that talks about using electrical stimulation to treat pain. And that's there's already a long literature by then, and we're 20 years later. So there's a huge literature. There are lots of, see this person has the electrodes on them, and you go in and some expert on pain treatment, kind of patches you up with these things, and then sends the stimulus through you. And I don't know about you, but I like the idea of taking a little Lifewave patch a whole lot better. There's also many studies, and when you're talking about the electrical charge and pain, there are many studies that use light as a carrier to get drugs and other molecules into the body. So those are the main ways I found electricity being used in the literature, as opposed to the Lifewave way, which is to increase the conductivity of the electrical flow in your body so that your body starts to move again. And then just another note on the fact that different patches can be studied in different ways. And it turns out that studying the bioelectrical field, there's really quite a few instruments now that are on the market to do that. The one here on the right with these little pictures we'll see, and we'll see in other talks. This is by a piece of equipment called a biopulsar. And David Schmidt has purchased one of these, I believe he said, for research in his own facility. But it's involved, you put your hands on the reader, and it is going to interpret the skin resistance. So notice what it's actually picking up is how much resistance is in your skin. There's over here, I just mentioned a few others. You'll see several reference to several when we talk about the studies that have been done on the Lifewave patches. But so Boyle looked at the electrical impedance behavior of biological tissue. And here I mentioned two different other pieces of equipment, acuscope and electro-interstitial scans. And one measures skin conductance along meridians and the other in the interstitial spaces. So it's not the kind of equipment you hear your doctor talking about when you go in for your annual physical or for some kind of checkup. You hear AQG and EEG, and I don't know that you hear about anything else, but there are a lot of tools out there that are, again, measuring frequencies at much lower levels, where they're getting at the way things operate in and between the cells, as opposed to on some much bigger area. So don't try to read this. I just want to tell you there's a lot of research on the IceWave patches. In particular, IceWave and Energy were two of the early patches. And so there's a lot, there are actually more research funded for published research on the Lifewave, on these two patches than on the subsequent ones. And that's because it's in these early days when they were establishing the fact that the energy did really move through the meridians and from the Lifewave patch. And it really when you went from the patch to the body, there really was no chemical passing through. They had to establish that so that the patches could be used by all the athletes, the Olympic athletes. So they're interesting if you really, want to see some of the basic science in terms of the patch technology, these earlier studies. As far as the IceWave patch is concerned, these sorts of before and after shots, they're great to look at. They're not so really, they're really kind of hard for clinical studies because you have to average all of this information in order to try and summarize it on a big group. But this is infrared imaging. And so it's actually, if you look down here at the bottom, there's a scale. It's actually measuring heat of the tissue. And so on the left, we have a little more than 24 degrees centigrade. And on the right, we have 34, almost 35 degrees centigrade. And so the left is before and the right is after. And you see these deep purple areas. That's up here with very hot skin. And in this particular person that we're looking at, the purple areas are reduced a lot. So you can actually get a visual image of what happened to this person. This study had 36 individuals in it. And on average, they cooled 1.5 degrees Celsius. So statistically, they had a significant effect, and that made everybody happy. Here's another study, but now on horses. And so a picture at the top here, we have the horses before patching, and the picture just 10 minutes after patching. So again, you have your scale on the bottom. And if you look at these purple areas that were close to 28 degrees, they're down to the green and the orange. Here, the orange and the yellow. That heat's really been just taken away, but also here here you have the bluer, much cooler. So what they found, this is Lauren Dirac is a vet. Dean Clark, I believe he's a chiropractor, and Homer Nazarin is a bioengineer, retired from the University of Texas, El Paso. I looked up these other two online, and they're still active. You can find their websites. So they're still patching the horses and the people. The horses in this study had mild to severe back pain, and they found that the sites that were too hot got cooler, and the sites that were too cool got warmer. And that's in 10 minutes. It's pretty amazing. So when they talk about it happens rapidly, they mean it happens rapidly. In a lot of cases, John Bishop will tell us that, for him, it was like, I don't know, 8 or 10 hours, but then it was a big effect that made up for it. So it's not fast for everybody, but it's often fast. Here's a study, the title's in that list I gave, but it was a study that was to validate IceWave in comparison with the glutathione and placebo patches. And in this case, we had 120 people, double-blinded, placebo-controlled. So down here in the purple, we have all the pieces of equipment they used in order to do their research. Again, if you want to know more about these pieces of equipment, they are discussed in my overview talk on YouTube. So what they found here, they didn't really find distinctions for the kinds of measurements they're taking. Nothing here is actually explicitly measuring pain. So they didn't distinguish between the IceWave and the glutathione. They found both created beneficial effects. That most of the changes were in the solar plexus and the lower back, along with positive change in the biofield itself. They could see that the chakras were opening up, particularly the solar plexus. And also, in particular, positive effects in the lung field. The lung fields and muscle spasms were reduced. So that's one thing the IceWaves are great at is muscle spasm. If you have those spasms at night, I'm still doing a lot of healing, and sometimes it's like I've got this, my hamstring or something just feels like it's about 2 feet too short for where it wants to be in my body. Of course, it always does that at about 2 or 3 or 1 o'clock at night. And I reach for the IceWave or the energy, whatever I can find fastest, and it is great relief. Okay, there was a study done in 2010 by a group of Italians, And they applied it on their patients. I don't have the number here, for 10 days. And they were studying the inflammatory response in the fluids by some piece of equipment called BioExplorer. In addition to the equipment, they had a questionnaire, and so they had the self-reported pain in terms of symptoms and changes. And what they found was that the inflammation markers were significantly reduced in the first 3 to 4 weeks, and that reduction was sustained for 12 weeks after they stopped using the patches. And they also found a correlation between the measurements they got from the equipment and the reports that were made, the self-reported pain changes from the individuals. They studied in particular neuropeptides in saliva that are involved in the inflammatory response, and they were probably studying the saliva because that's an easy sample to take. You didn't have to draw anybody's blood or anything. So it was nice that they could get a measurement as easily as that. It's not the case for all of the patches. So Helmer Nazarin and Stephen Halterwager, I've got pictures of them here. So they've done quite a bit of the early research on the patches. And this particular study in 2011 involved looking at neuromuscular pain. Again, they were looking at electroconduction, and they also had a person assessment, a practical assessment. They had 30 subjects, and they found that the intensity and the perception of pain, the objectively measured intensity and the reported perception of pain both significantly reduced in these patients. Another Italian group, they used something called a NM4 gauge to measure neuromuscular potential, and not quite sure that, I can't explain that, but other people probably can. They had 100 subjects. They took the measurements before and immediately after the application of the Lifewave patches, and they reported that the Lifewave was effective in the acute and the chronic phase of the pain, and that the pain moderation reported was proportional to the measures they got from this particular device. So there's some good measurement tools out there if anybody wants to do some more studies. Now, we must be getting close to the end. We have a double-blind placebo-controlled study that looked over 2 days. It had 62 individuals, and they were looking at arthritic pain. And voila, there was a significant difference between the pain reported by those with and without the patches. So enough positive studies here to, I think, be completely conclusive. One more, another neuromuscular pain, and we have 40 subjects, and we look at pre-testing, pre-patching 1 and 3 hours after patching on day 1. And then they were also patched on days 2 to 5, and they looked 1 hour after patching. And at every time point, the change in the perception, one's perception of pain was improved, as was the electroconductivity of the connective tissues in the skin. So they documented that their way of looking at what was happening was that they were stimulating acupuncture points, improving the flow of energy without needles. And they used the clock method which I'll show you on the next slide for patching. And I've heard it said that one of the ideas behind this method was that you're going to move the patches around, looking for the best positioning, and they were thinking that within a few moves you were going to hit an electrical current, an acupuncture meridian site that was going to then do the job for you. So here's the clock method. You see the red areas where the person's in pain. And so they point to the pain site and you slap the tan patch there. And then you go some distance. Typically they say 12 o'clock, but obviously 12 o'clock's up in the air up here. So you go, 6 inches, whatever sort of feels right, away from that tan patch, and you just pull half of the backing off the white patch so that you don't use up all that stickum. And so you put the white patch about 6 inches away, and you wait for 10 seconds. And before you start, you ask them on a scale from you ask them to consider how much pain they're in and to equate that amount of pain to 10. And so then when they move it, you say, well, how much pain now? And if it's pain's gone, you're through. But if they say 5 or 6 or something, then you move to the next spot. So here you're moving down like a clock. You're going down to about the 9 o'clock spot. And if that didn't work, you go to 6 o'clock here in the third one. You go to, or excuse me, this one was 3 o'clock. I don't know my clock. Go to 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And if that didn't work, you can try it on the front, with the other ones on the back. And so usually the pain's gone within a few moves. But if you've basically gone through, a reasonable set of alternatives and the person is still in pain, then you put the white patch where they felt the most relief, and then you leave it for 12 hours or send them to bed, or they can take it off in the morning or something. And as I said, that was the case with John Bishop, was that, as he said, he's kind of felt sorry for the person that had him drive to Seattle to try these patches on because he really didn't feel anything. And it's an hour and a half back to Bellingham from Seattle. And it wasn't until he was coming into his driveway back here in Bellingham that all of a sudden his back let go, and pain that he'd had since he was a young boy disappeared. So that was very cool. And he used the patches then regularly for some period of time, and then just started using them less and less, and the pain's been gone now for 2 years. So that's really cool. I have a similar story with my husband in his hand. It was 10 seconds, well, it was 30 seconds. I moved it twice. 30 seconds, the pain was gone. Okay, so Lifewave does not make medical products. It doesn't claim to heal any diseases. It is a way to help you with your wellness program. And if you have a disease of some sort, you should discuss this with your physician. And with that, I will just comment that I have a YouTube channel at Nancy Flournoy, and I have a talk on each of the patches. You can find them there. I update them when I give a new talk like this one. So it's a few days, this talk will show up there. Right now, you'll get last year's talk, and last year's talk on IceWave was much more confused than this year's. So each time they're better. I invite you to join me on the 1st and 3rd Fridays in April, when we'll talk about X39 and X49. So thank you for coming. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.